as a rule, liquefied natural gas is the most expensive way to move natural gas from one place to another, because you have to basically freeze it into a liquid, put it into a specialized tanker, ship it across an ocean, unload it in another specialized facility that can then regasify it and put it in your system. And in the case of Germany, they're using ships to do that last step, which is also the most expensive way to do it. So the cost structure for this new stuff is 2, 3, 4, 5 times as much as what the Russians used to sell their natural gas to Europe for. And that sets the price structure for the entire natural gas market, heating market, industrial energy market, and electricity market. So on the good hand, yes, the Europeans are unlikely to see the lights actually go out because of a lack of material. That's great. They're going to see it go out because of a price level that no one can afford. Now, the only way you can deal with this is by reducing marginal demand. You're talking about everyone needing to cut their energy consumption by about 10 to 30%. Right now, the Europeans are a little ahead of the schedule on that, but they haven't had to shut down anything from an industrial point of view, and that is coming. One of the key things to remember is that Germany is not like the United States. In the United States, we're relatively agnostic about where we get our energy, domestic versus foreign, coal versus natural gas versus solar versus wind. And because of that, no marginal supplier in the national market is able to really dictate prices because there's always a replacement system. Well, the Germans are removing nuclear from the mix, and the Russians have removed natural gas from the mix, and other countries have coal or nuclear. Germany doesn't have any of that. So they're all being supplied by marginal suppliers right now. And if you go into winter, when demand skyrockets because it's cold in the winter, you know that prices are going to go through the roof, even if supplies are not in danger. What that means is in Germany, we have a very big problem coming up, not just because we're going to be seeing blackouts or brownouts or high prices, but in order to crush that demand, the German government's going to have a very clear choice to make. Let their people freeze in the dark or reduce industrial demand. And unlike the United States, where we're very agnostic about where we get our petrochemicals and what fuel sources go into it, because the Germans have removed so many things from the equation, they use Russian natural gas to fuel their petrochemicals to provide the base for their heavy and medium manufacturing. And if you remove that from the mix, that is the end of the German manufacturing model. I would be shocked if Germany was not already in recession. And this winter, when this system breaks down, that means we're going to have an industrial recession in Germany and every country that participates in that industrial system. That includes the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and probably a couple that I didn't mention just because I forgot. So we are looking at the end of what makes the heart of German manufacturing and the European economy work.
Over the course of the last few days, the Russians have started limiting natural gas supplies specifically to Bulgaria and Poland with the intent of forcing on the rest of Europe payment in rubles specifically. And there are a number of economic entities, not governments at this point, just private players in Germany, Austria, and Hungary that are agitating within the European system to be able to do just that, because the Austrians, the Germans, and the Hungarians are particularly wired in to the Russian system. So first, a few words on infrastructure. There are a number of pipes from the Russian space that go into the European space that allow the Russians to selectively cut off specific countries. So what the Russians are trying to do is get some countries to violate their contracts. The Russians are obviously violating their own. Obviously, from a legal point of view, this is a war. But the Europeans love a good meeting, and they love a good bureaucracy. So anything that puts problems within the gears, throw some sand into the operation. That's what the Russians are after. In my opinion, the takeaway capacity for Russian energy has been dropped so much between sanctions and boycotts that we're seeing pressure build up through the entire Russian system all the way to the wellheads. And once that happens, the Russians are going to have to shut in a lot of production. So at the end of the day, at some point this summer, all of this is going to go away anyway, and it's going to seem like a moot point globally. And globally it is. But that's not what the Russians are after. The Russians are after kind of the second point, which is if they can get cracks and fissures within the European coalition to open up over energy, then they have a lot more breathing room. The ultimate goal, kind of the gold standard for the Russians, would be to get the Germans to no longer participate in the sanctions and boycotts at all. And if the Germans do that, the Austrians and the Hungarians who could be counted on to be brought along for the ride. If the Russians can get the Germans to no longer play in the war, that is pretty much all the logistical capacity for the entire NATO alliance for shipping things into Ukraine. That's ultimately what the Russians are after here. And they have a reasonably good chance of getting it. The Russians know that the Germans have very few options. They don't have the ability to import natural gas from the sea. They don't have a single LNG terminal. They don't have the ability to reroute crude because the two refineries that they have that use Russian crude exclusively are landlocked and they have no connection to ports. So there's a possibility they can do the same thing for the Austrians, the Hungarians, and the Germans. And the French basically turn all of their nuclear power plants up to max and start shipping electricity in. And the Italians probably will do something similar, although they'll be using different fuels, probably coal and even burning oil. But there are ways here to prevent this from being catastrophic.